Human trafficking is a term we hear everywhere, in headlines, on social media, and whispered through our communities. But how much do we really understand about what it is, who it impacts, and how to respond? I'm Miko Anderson, and this is the Traffic Report, a podcast from Equitas. This season, we'll sit down with survivors, prosecutors, advocates, and allies, not only to uncover the impact of human trafficking, but to focus on what comes next, the strategies, reforms, and community-driven solutions survivors need from us. We'll look at where systems fall short, and we'll highlight the innovations that practitioners are building to make support safer, stronger, and sustainable. Together, we'll explore what it takes to create real and lasting change. Today, we're looking at what it takes for systems to stay present with survivors over the long haul. Not just the immediate crisis, but months, even years after the initial contact. Many agencies expect compliance from survivors. But what happens when survivors don't or can't follow rigid schedules or procedures? Often, it's not a refusal, it's a system failure. Long-term engagement requires systems built around the needs of the survivors, flexible scheduling, multiple entry points, and constant feedback from the people these programs are meant to serve. In this episode, we'll explore what sustained victim support looks like in practice, how agencies can redesign processes to center survivor needs, and what it takes to measure engagement quality instead of mere compliance. To help us break this down, we're joined by Dr. Stephanie Powell, whose expertise in trauma-informed system design and long-term survivor support gives us a blueprint for making systems work for survivors, not against them. Dr. Powell is a nationally recognized expert on human trafficking and sexual exploitation. She is a retired LAPD sergeant with over 30 years' experience leading VICE, a former executive director of Journey Out, where she helped victims escape sexual exploitation and forced prostitution. Since 2013, she has educated over 20,000 people on the civil and criminal aspects of sexual exploitation. She's assisted approximately 2,000 survivors with human trafficking issues such as employment, court assistance, housing. She even helped deliver a baby. She developed new policies for the LA Fire Department and the National Massage School industry to address exploitation. She was featured in the PBS documentary And Still I Rise and on Headline News with Chris Como. She authored a teen human trafficking prevention workbook, My Choice, My Body, My Rules. Dr. Powell, it is an honor to have you here today. With so much ground to cover, I know our listeners are eager to hear your insights on how to build systems that truly support survivors long term. Our premise has been in this season to really talk about how the systems have sometimes, even with the best intentions, quote unquote, ghosted survivors, as opposed to the reverse that is commonly held belief that survivors are ghosting the system. Before we get into the way we can really provide long-term support, I wanted to talk to you about another missing piece that isn't discussed that often, but the need to address the demand side. Have you, in your work, from all the different agencies and different perspectives that you've had, seen that as a true need and have any insight you can share with us?
Yes, absolutely. We all talk about eradicating human trafficking. And that is the portion that is often left out, and that's addressing those that buy human beings for the purposes of commercial sex. And so it is so extremely important that that is addressed. When you look at it from the law enforcement lens, if the people that are only being arrested are the victims or those that are the prostituted, if those are the only ones that are being arrested, there is a large portion that is not, again, being addressed. Not only those that are buying, but we cannot forget those that are the pimps or the traffickers that are complicit in this as well. So when law enforcement, and there's been a paradigm shift Absolutely, on a national basis, where they understand that the solution cannot be solo, where it's only the prostituted that are being arrested. And then victims should never be arrested, so I want to say that. But that we're looking at it from a helicopter view, and that would include holding the sex buyers accountable as well.
And it makes sense when you think of it in the form of an ecosystem because that's really what it is. If that demand piece is reduced and addressed and focused on, then you won't have the need for that exploitation because it really is for the financial benefit of the exploiter. So in that big picture, it matters. And then if I could just share a story that I had from a survivor on this point when we were speaking about it in a different training, she made it clear that because the buyers or the Johns, whatever term you use, are the ones who she felt physically violated her the most and sometimes were the most brutal. And they were always seen, would get just a slap on the wrist or get some form of diversion and never really suffer a lot of consequence. And so it just really reinforced the idea that there needs to be like a comprehensive plan to address all pieces of that ecosystem. So I really appreciate you sharing that with that missing piece of what needs to occur to support survivors of trafficking.
It's funny, as you were speaking, the word that kept coming to mind is the word services. Services need to also, you can't do any of this without providing services to victims of human trafficking. So that's important as well.
Right, because it seems like in the immediate crisis now, that paradigm shift that you talked about, people respond and they have services immediately, maybe services to get the survivor through the night or maybe through the criminal process. But at some point, that seems to dwindle, but the trauma still remains. Have you encountered that? And how important is it to have long lasting services for survivors?
Not only does it have to be long lasting, but when you're walking alongside a survivor, they may go back out into the life. Nonprofit organizations are victim services. They have to be open enough to allow that person to come back in no matter how many times they need to come back in. That's extremely important. I did this when I was at Journey Out, and Journey Out continues to do it. It's not a situation where now you put them up in a hotel, but that you're still walking alongside that victim and make that very clear. We're not going to leave you. I used to always say, we're not going to leave you till you get tired of us. So we would work with victims for 2, 3, 4. There's some, because Journey Out had been around for about 40 years, I kid you not, that they were still working with 10 years later. Or they would come back after 20 years. Like, so it has to be continuous because for that for that victim's life, it's not that clear cut because of the fact that they are dealing with multiple forms of victimization. They may have dealt with child abuse, dealing with domestic violence, dealing with the fact that because they were in the life, they have a long arrest record, or they didn't get the education that they needed. So as I am speaking of those things, you could see some of the gaps that need to be filled. And so I believe that nonprofit organizations that really want to be a part of really helping victims of human trafficking, they have to understand that they've got to be in the long run for however long it takes that victim to now become whole. Not become whole based on the standards of the organization, but become whole based on how that person sees him or herself in terms of being whole. So if you're in it as a victim service provider, understand that you got to be in it for the long run.
What are some of the challenges then that victim service providers face when they are in it for the long run? Because I'd like to think that that's what they want to do, but it has to be some difficulty inherent with that long lasting relationship.
First of all, you're dealing with someone who, and especially when we talk about the trauma, they may not trust you right away. So there has to be a length of time where trust can be established. And true trust is not established on the first meeting. Also understanding that because of the things that they have gone through, us sitting here talking about it sounds really easy. But when you are in it and you're really working with them, you're talking about a complicated person who everybody that they trusted went sideways on them. So it's going to take them a minute. You might even get cussed out, or you might be ignored. But once they see that you are in it and you keep calling, you keep your doors open, man, I mean, I call it an honor. When a victim of human trafficking trusts you, that's an honor because you have gained that trust. So it's not that easy. And it is all individual, right? You may have some that might trust you faster. You might have some that don't. And it takes a minute, but understand this, that once that trust is developed, if you go back on your word or something happens that they don't understand and you don't explain it, you need to be there to explain it and understand that once that trust is gained, that you may have to do things to reestablish that trust.
I agree with that. That trust piece is it's key and it doesn't happen as fast as you would like it to. But if you are consistent and continue to be present, it does. The other thing that I noticed that can be a challenge in this work when it comes to like long-standing relationships and being a constant presence is the fact that even the professionals at the nonprofit can suffer burnout. They can get exhausted. They can have the need for support themselves. So not only being able to make a conscious effort to give lasting support, but also know that there is a need that they receive lasting support from those who can provide it in their organizations. And I think that's often overlooked when it um, comes to like advocates, and I always say like I advocate for advocates because they give so much. And generally, so many of them have past histories of trauma or abuse or can relate to it on a different level, which is why they can be so committed. But at the same time, it could be wearing on them after time. So making sure that there is a real program, not just one in paper, that really addresses their needs. Have you seen any that are good or seen at least progress in that area when it comes to addressing the needs to support the professionals who are doing the work?
I've seen progress. Um, and sometimes what happens with organizations, especially your smaller grassroots organizations, they only have so many people working within that organization because they don't have the money to do it. So sometimes it's not because the organization doesn't want to do that self-care portion for the employees. Sometimes it's really hard to do it, especially if you say something like, whenever you need to take a day off, just know that it's okay to take a day off to take care of yourself. Organizations might want to say that all day long, but sometimes that may be hard if you only have 3 people working. So I just want
Right.
to be able to throw that out, that with some organizations, not because they don't want to, some of them may not have the capacity to do that. Having said that, though, I think when we talk about the self-care portion of it, is that it's not just one day and you go to the spa. It has to be continuous. There might be times where you need personal health days where the person is able to take the day off, or the leadership needs to be have an open door policy that's really an open door policy all the time, where the person can just come in and vent or talk. You also have to provide an environment where the employees also understand how much leadership cares about them. And honestly, the other part, and I know this is hard, especially if for those nonprofits that are listening, is the pay. And that's why if people are listening that are donors or they have grants, where that helps is when someone is donating money so that organizations can do retreats, they can really do self-care, that can pay their employees a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, you could be doing a great service. But if you are unable to pay your rent at the same time or pay for health care, you're going to also be thinking about that, which also puts more of a burden for the employee that's just really trying to do a good job for something. And you hit it right on the nose, Miko, that it's something that they really care about and is important. So I want to say that when it comes to survivors, especially nonprofits that are employing survivors, they also need to provide a venue for them that if they need therapy, they can get that through the whole time that they are working for that organization. And if solely possible, if it could be for free and that it be the right therapist that understands survivors. So I just want to say that part.
And that's why collaboration, um, all the support that nonprofits give to survivors need to be, they actually need to receive. And the same thing when it comes to law enforcement. So you have the benefit of having multiple perspectives. So as a LAPD sergeant assigned to the Vice unit, what challenges did you see in that role? And I know you've retired, I think in 2013.
Yes.
What challenges did you see there, and have you seen trends positively that show some progress that kind of tackle those challenges?
As it pertains to working the Vice unit with LAPD, I think I think sometimes people don't see law enforcement as being people too, right? And so what happens is there's this expectation within law enforcement that you can handle anything. You can handle dead bodies, you can handle children being trafficked, you can handle the horrible things that you see in the street. And yes, you can handle it, but sometimes the method of handling it is stuffing and not showing that emotion. Also, keep in mind that vice officers are also dealing with the whole issue of sex. So they're seeing people having sex. They're going into strip clubs. They are looking at pornography for work. And so what sometimes happens is that they become desensitized to it. And so again, this is where vice sergeants, supervisors, command staff needs to see these guys working these particular things. If they're working ICAT, they're looking at videos and in some cases live images of people abusing children. So officers may not say anything. Officers may not say, I need to take a break. They shouldn't have to say it, know that they need to take a break. So that same thing that nonprofits are offering to their employees, law enforcement may need to do the same thing. They need to be able to take a mental health day. Maybe they need to work another assignment if they just came off of a huge case. Maybe what they need to do is maybe have them work inside, still, working the same thing, but maybe you'll have them working something a little different just to be able to give them a break or being able, and this is everybody, as I think for leadership, you got to know your people. When you know your people, you know when they start to get stressed out. You know when they're acting a little different. Because think about it, those things are also impacting their families as well. So I think the same things that are happening to advocates are also happening to law enforcement officers as well. It just may present itself differently.
And as you were talking, it made me realize that a lot of times there can be tension between nonprofits and law enforcement in some communities where they think either side really doesn't have a trust for the other. So they think that, working with either nonprofits working with law enforcement, they might think that there is something that might be of a negative consequence as it refers to their client. But that area of overlap where it comes to the well-being and the need for that self-care and organizations to take a piece in that could really be a great starting place to kind of build those relationships because I found, like, when I was prosecuting, that the more you knew the person in the position, the easier it was to work with the person. The more you knew that person. When you don't have that personal connection or relationship, it makes it a lot more difficult. So just in this conversation, it dawned on me that that would be a great starting place to get those areas that have tension between law enforcement and the nonprofits, to start to maybe kind of work together and fight the same issue when it comes to that. Another question that I had was about just how the work is being done. A lot of times when it comes to finding something that's sustainable as far as support, we look to metrics that might not really tell us what it is that we really want to know. Like in law enforcement, we might look to arrests, prosecution officers, we might look to convictions. Is there some metrics that you think could help us better serve in the long run in a way that's more comprehensive, but really understands what the trauma is and what we're looking for and kind of aiming for?
So, just remind me to go back to the matrix aspect because there's two things I wanted to say that I think was great. When you have two entities, just as you described, that are working well together, oh my God, doesn't that pan out very well for the clients and the people that we're serving? So you're absolutely right. There has to be a good working relationship. Within that working relationship, Nico, you know that takes special people because you have nonprofits that can work well with the police, and you got police that can work well with nonprofits. But that takes special individuals within those two groupings to work together. So you are apt because it's not going to always work. But when it works perfectly. And when it works, it really does help the people that at the end of the day that we're trying to serve. Because I think what is important here, law enforcement wants to help that person as much as the advocates do. And I think that that kind of gets lost in the messaging. There has been such a paradigm shift just since I have retired, where law enforcement really is looking at the human trafficking victim as a victim. They are really understanding that more than they used to. Does there still need to be work? Absolutely. But there needs to be work on both sides because some of the nonprofits see the law enforcement as an enemy. I mean, look at me coming into this field as a sergeant. I was literally running into some people that I had arrested. But once they saw me being my authentic self as really there to advocate for them, they saw me as the best advocate for that because I did know both sides. So that is so very important. And it doesn't have to be someone exactly like me, but where both sides really understand one another and they don't see each other as an enemy. What also needs to be respected when you think about it, law enforcement's job is to arrest and to see that bad guys go to jail. Advocate's job is to help that victim and advocate for the victim. So, as everyone can see just by those definitions, two separate jobs that need to be done, but there needs to be a respect for one another, with the common denominator being that victims are not arrested. In terms of the matrix aspect of it, there are certain assessments that are out there. And unfortunately, I can't think of one that we used at Journey Out, but there are assessments out there, especially when you are doing, when you get a new person into a new client. There are assessment tools that could be used to be able to not only identify that victim as a victim, but what type of services that are they going to actually need? And the one thing I did want to say, kind of going back just for a second, when you were talking about systems, nonprofits have to understand that navigating the system can be huge. It can be annoying because of bureaucracy. Just for ourselves, going to DMV, going to, those huge bureaucracies where you got to fill out all of this paperwork. Try going to get a loan for a house. You know how that feels. Well, sometimes for the client, it's just as enormous. So it's so very important when I talk about walking alongside the client that you go down to Social Security, that you go down to the welfare office with them to help them navigate those systems. So there are assessment tools that are out there that can help nonprofit organizations to be able to assess those clients in terms of those needs. Now, law enforcement may not use those same assessment tools, well, of course not, because that's not their job. But where I believe that could be helpful when you have that relationship is that the nonprofit could be there to help law enforcement understand why is it that your victim doesn't show up in court? Why is it that your victim appears to be non-cooperative, so therefore you just lost that case? What does all of that look like? So everyone has to really be in sync, but in sync with the understanding that there's two agendas or three agendas that need to be addressed at the same time. But what is most important is that the welfare of that client, of that victim, has to be of the utmost importance.
How do you incorporate survivor input or real feedback in a way that's more than just limited to that case or particular instance, either at law enforcement or a nonprofit? How do you make sure that you have real lived experience experts chiming in on how procedures and policies and how those things when law enforcement and nonprofits, medical, all these different disciplines are working with survivors? How do you make sure that the survivors' input is amplified?
What is important about the input of the survivor or those with lived experiences, not only having them seated at the table, but really have them understand that their input is important. So, somebody will ask your opinion, you give your opinion, and it just fell on deaf ears. So their voice needs to be just as important as everybody else that's in that room, if not even more important because they have lived it. Nonprofits could do that by hiring um, those with lived experiences, and again, have their opinions actually count. Not just, they're just talking and nothing's coming out. Um, because their input is so extremely important. And then also, oftentimes people will hire those with lived experience and they'll keep them in that same position for like 5, 6 years. No, what you need to do is find out, what do they want to do? Do they want to become the executive director of their own organization at some point? And these are things that all these things that I'm telling you, I did while I was at Journey Out. Maybe they need to shadow me to see what it's like. What is it like when I'm negotiating contracts? What is it like when I am talking to other organizations in collaboration? So maybe they don't want to just be noted as a survivor or just be noted within the organization as having lived experience. Maybe they at some point want to do bookkeeping or the CPA. They need to shadow um, other aspects within that organization, or they might want to become grant writers. Can you imagine someone with lived experiences now know how to be grant writers? They're going to be able to put nuances in that grant that others had not even thought of. So I think that's important. Not only include them, but they need to have full partnership when it comes to those things. And um, I just think that those are the things that are extremely important when you include those with lived experiences. And don't exploit them. Pay them. They need to get paid. Not just use them to be able to speak at your next fundraising event where where they're recounting their experiences, which that there should be boundaries around that as well. And then you give them a plan at the end. No, because 9 times out of 10, when we talk about the systems that have failed them, they are still getting on their feet. They still have bills to pay. So if they're that great of an asset to your organization, then you need to pay them with that in mind.
Right. I agree with that. And also just when you said about the bookkeeping, uh noting or just being aware that not every survivor wants to be in the anti-trafficking movement. So long-lasting support requires that communication that you described to find out exactly what it is that they ultimately want to do. So to help them with that. See, it looks like we have a question from our listening community, and it's one that we kind of touched on a little bit. So, for communities that want to start measuring engagement quality, what's the first metric that you would suggest they track and why?
So what I would suggest, and there's probably some out there that are probably a lot more modern than when I was, when I first started doing this work in 2013. But you can honestly go to the Blue Campaign, go to Polaris, those organizations, go on their website. If you go into the United Nations website, they have an assessment tool as well, and they have a carve out just for human trafficking. So those are a start. And then, of course, I'm the Google queen. I'm always asking Google, or I won't say her name because she's in the room, but it starts with a S, SIR, and she'll speak up. There are so many more resources out there than what there was even 10 years ago. This is constantly evolving. These paradigm shifts within law enforcement and victim advocacy continues to grow. So I would say start with the Blue Campaign, Polaris, United Nations, and just start researching. And you're probably going to find some that I don't even know about, but that would be a start.
One of the things that I think of when it comes to measuring engagement is really understanding the significance of those outreach programs. A lot of times they are so underrated because it doesn't necessarily relate to a particular survivor or it doesn't turn on a conviction or an arrest, but outreach and making sure that you have like a strong effort in that lane, I always thought was helpful with collaboration and then helpful with connecting to the community. Dr. Powell, before you leave me, we like to do at the close of each episode what we call three rapid fire questions. So are you ready for these three questions?
Oh boy, okay.
Look, they're not intense, but they're important. Okay. What's something that you have learned from a survivor that changes how you work?
Working with survivors without judgment, working alongside survivors and helping them with their dream, not the dream that I have for them,
Mm.
and letting go because at the end of the day, it's not about me.
What is one resource or tool that you will recommend to everyone in the field? And I will note that you authored one, so that could be it.
Ah! My body, my choice, my rules. I have a workbook, and the workbook is geared toward prevention for middle and high school students. And the premise of that book is helping with self esteem, really helping with self esteem with young men and young women understanding that they're enough. Because low self esteem could be the kryptonite for traffickers. They're looking for that. So it's a workbook. It's an interactive workbook with affirmations. It also has there is a toolkit in there for young people to get involved in the movement safely to become advocates. That tool is the one that I have, but also the ones that I named previously in terms of the Blue Campaign and Polaris, and Shared International is another one. Go on their websites, and there's so many things that would be helpful.
And I did want to note about your workbook that the ability to give it doesn't require that the facilitator be an expert, so that it has like facilitator instructions. So um, it leads to really good conversation, but it's not doesn't require that person to be an expert. And then finally, you talked about a paradigm shift. What is one sign of progress that you are seeing right now?
There's actually two. One is that law enforcement is really changed the mindset in terms of seeing human trafficking victims as victims. Of course, we know there's some areas that may not, but overall, they actually get it. The other thing is that I love that, and I know some people are not going to like this term love, but I'm happy that the focus is starting to change on not making massive arrests of the prostituted, but actually going after the sex buyers and actually going after the traffickers. So that paradigm shift, I'm happy to see, coupled with the need for services for those with lived experiences.
Thank you for that. Well, Dr. Powell, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and taking the time to speak with us today, and help us to really give careful thought to what it means to provide lasting support for survivors. And to our listeners, to remember that every policy, procedure, program can either support or push away someone in need. So make sure that survivor input is included, because the real change will happen when we listen and connect and have those communications and collaborate together, so we can truly have systems that are designed to help actually be help and be supportive to survivors. So thank you again.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing. This
Oh,
is so
thank you.
needed.
For more information about Equitas, go to equitasresource.org. That's AEQUITAS resource.org. Or follow us on Equitas_resource on Instagram. The series is executive produced by Jennifer Long, Miko Anderson, Equitas, and Robin Hopkins. Our production coordinator is Eleni Angeles, and the series is sound designed and edited by Brian J. Lighton.